Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever is appropriate for you. Welcome along. My name is Matt Fitzsimmons. I'm a business coach. This is the Best Small Business in the World podcast, and it's a pleasure to work with my co-author, Sturdy McKee. Morning, Sturdy. How are you? It's morning where I am.
It's morning where I am, Matt. Good
There you
morning.
go.
How are you?
We're practically neighbours.
Except it's not the same day.
It's not the same day. Yes. I can tell you what today's going to be like because I'm currently living it. So you can
Right.
look forward. I'll give you the tips on the horses or something.
That would be useful.
So today, I think a really interesting topic, Sturdy, would be talking around the difference between management and leadership. And as a small business owner, you're often thrust into the position where you got to do both. But it's interesting because you've got two kind of different hats to wear. And I think that would be really interesting for us to explore. And I think some of our leaders who listen to this podcast might be interested to have some thoughts about what the difference is between management and leadership. My take on it is that they are two different jobs, but they are intrinsically aligned. So leadership is partly providing a direction, a set of values, a pathway for people to be part of, and really defining the customer and the business's journey through the business. So they're in charge of saying, right, guys, this is where we're headed. Come on for the journey. It's going to be great fun. And they say that to their team. They say it to their customers. They say it for everyone. This is where we're going. Now, they don't necessarily have to, and this is the thing about leadership, is that they don't necessarily have to make all the decisions themselves, but they're the ones who firm it up and are the champions of the direction of the business. And we talk a lot in the Best Small Business in the World about setting, your vision of meaning. And that's what those guys, I believe, leadership is about championing that vision of meaning and saying, right, guys, come on, this is going to be a really fun ride. Let's head in this direction. And so it's more about inspiring your team. And contrast that against management, which I think it's kind of similar and it's definitely related, but it's quite different because management is about taking this direction and going, okay, what's the stuff that we need to do? Okay, it's business as usual, which is great, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that we need to do to go from wherever we are to wherever we want to be. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think of them as leadership at deciding what needs to get done. I think you put it well when you said do the right things, and management is ensuring those things get done, right? So doing things right is, I think, the way you put it. So yeah, I think there's a division there a little bit, but there's obviously a lot of overlap. There's also a lot of misinterpretation, misunderstanding around who does what, because you can manage a project, you can manage things, you can lead with any job title. It doesn't require you to be the owner or the CEO. Of course, it's incumbent upon you, if you are, to take up that that mantle and do those things. Demonstrate leadership. But you can have other people in your organization who are definitely leaders, regardless of their title. Does that jive with what you've seen?
Absolutely. And also I think that you've actually raised a really good point because leadership is not for everybody, and nor is management. And I know in a lot of small businesses, we both know, often people come through because they're great technicians. They're really good at what they do as a trade. And then they find themselves in a management or a leadership position, not doing what they were trained to do. And I know that you've seen that in your own business where you get these amazingly talented people and then you ask them to do something that's different, that's management or it's leadership or something like that. So it's actually a different skill set. It's not mutually exclusive, but it is a different skill set. And I think one of the great things as a leader you can do is recognize that not everybody is cut out to be a manager or a leader, and whatever. And some people are cut out to be leaders and not managers, and vice versa. And I think we see that in so many businesses where you've got the person who just sets the standard, and they might be, in a cafe, they might be a shift supervisor, they might be at a relatively low rank, if you will, but they provide the standard setting and the leadership as far as that goes, far beyond, like you were saying, far beyond their position. I mean, I'm sure you've seen that.
Oh, for sure. And yeah, just I like your point. I was going to say exactly the same thing. It's a different skill set, and that whole idea of skill set when you find somebody who's a great contributor. And again, this is why I like the model of sports and athletic teams and that type of thing, because you can be a great player. It doesn't necessarily make you a great coach. And I
Mm,
like to think of my managers, and um, I think this is a good framework to think about it. The manager is really the coach, right? The coach is managing the team. In baseball, they literally call them the manager. In football or soccer, in European countries, they call them the manager. Um,
yep, 100%.
so and it's the coach, right? What we would call the coach. Um, but they're ensuring the players are in the right position. They're ensuring the players have what they need, that the plays are drafted and called. I mean, there's obviously a leadership role there. You see the team captain, though, in leadership role, but maybe not managing quite the same way, right? And anyway, I think it's a really good division or way to think about it, because you can be a really, really good player and not necessarily a great manager, right? And
Mm,
you can be a really good coach and maybe not have been the best player in the world. And there are tons of examples of this. Um, you see it out there. Michael Jordan didn't make a great coach. He's
mm,
one of the best players in the world, right? Ever.
yep,
Steve Kerr played on the same team with Michael Jordan, right? Kind of a support player, and yet he's, if anybody knows basketball, he's won several titles, and is by all accounts a great coach, right? So
yep.
you see this also. I mean, there are dozens of examples. Think of your favorite sport, and people who really excelled in the coaching leadership role. Maybe the leadership role on the field, but then not translated into the managing coaching role, or vice versa.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the difference between a manager and a leader, another way of looking at it is, so I very occasionally get a personal trainer at the gym. Admittedly, you wouldn't always know, but sometimes I do. And the for me, the personal trainer provides motivation, because they are for that workout. They are my manager. They are managing me as a person doing exercise. They're making sure I'm going hard enough and all that sort of thing. But when they're not there, I won't necessarily go as hard because they provide motivation, right? So that's what a manager does, kind of, is provide motivation. I'm here. Come on, guys, we're going to do this. Let's go harder, or do whatever we're going to do. The leader provides inspiration. So the leader is the person who sits there and goes, "Hey, I ran a marathon. You could too." And that's the person who will pull up or plant a seed in your head and go, "Wow, I can actually probably do that," or "We could do that as a company," or "We could do that as a group of people." And they plant the seed and they let it grow. And that's, I think, the job of a leader, is to plant those seeds and going, "Wow, maybe we could do that." And so I've got a friend of mine who is an amazing athlete, and he surrounds himself with people who are far better because they inspire him to become all that he could be. But he also needs sometimes a manager in this particular scenario to actually go and kick his ass hard enough during any particular workout, which is quite cool. So I think that's possibly another distinction you could make, is one provides inspiration. This is where we're going, and like it's a bigger, longer term goal, whereas the other one is motivation. It's right here, right now. Come on, guys, let's do this. And that's often a conversation that we have. And I think that so if you're going to differentiate between sort of motivation and inspiration, then also the other thing I have to think about is, one is very much about people and one is about stuff. And I have if I can just show you what I explain to people. I'll just change my camera and I'll just show you what I explain to people sometimes regarding the difference between a manager and a leader and their focus. So there are 4 levels of people in a business. So you've got the leader up at the top, you've got a manager, you've got a supervisor, you've got a worker, or you could say player, captain, coach, yeah, manager, coach, or something like that. You can use whatever language you see. And there's two things that need to be done in a business. There's tasks, and there's task stuff, so getting stuff done, and there's people stuff. And if you look at where each of these people spend their time, if you're a worker, well, you're probably going to spend 90% of your time on tasks, right? Just getting stuff done. If I'm working in a medical practice, I'm going to be seeing patients. I'm going to be doing all that type of thing. It's very functional work. And maybe they might spend 10% on the people side of things, and maybe doing a bit of training with some other people or mentoring or whatever. And then if we go up to the other end of the business, then the time that they spend and how they spend their time is probably going to be reversed. And you see this in every company that's successful, because the leader spends 90% of their time on people and only 10% of their time on actually doing stuff. And so there's this massive difference between what you do at the top with your time and what you're going to do at the bottom. So you've got this massive continuum. And then often what I say to people who own small businesses is sometimes a bit of a reality check is, where do you spend your time? Is it up here in this really high quality, high value leadership role? Or are you spending your time as nothing much more than a shift supervisor, or maybe just a worker? And so when people are looking at what they do on a day-to-day basis, this is a really good check-in. And maybe if you're having a listen to our podcast, then you could sort of write that down and take a look at that and go, okay, well, this is how I spend my time. And it is a bit of a reality check that, sometimes we're probably not spending enough time as leaders doing the leadership thing, because it is a really important task. But often, because we come from trades backgrounds, a lot of us, we spend time doing the trade stuff. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. It's that transition from being the hardest working player on the field to being more of the coach, right? And one of the things, and it's why we start with the vision of meaning, right? That's the first part of the book. But the vision, the purpose, what John Spence, right over here, right, calls vivid vision. You as the leader are painting a picture of maybe what doesn't exist yet, right? You're
Mm,
getting you're painting the picture, coming up, explaining the ideas, explaining the destination. You're This is where the visionary idea comes in. You literally are a visionary because you see something that doesn't yet exist. And that's a key component, I believe, of the leadership, and being able to inspire and being able to communicate that to people, and really continually, repeatedly communicate the vision and infuse that, interweave that into the fabric of the organization. Because then when other people can see it, they will, that's where the inspiration comes from. So it's not, being a charismatic, rah rah, gung ho necessarily. It's about painting a picture of the future for folks to see and then to embrace and then to strive for. What do you think on that, Matt?
mm. I think you're absolutely, you hit the nail on the head, mate. And it's really interesting when you look around the world at the high profile leaders, and some of them are really great examples of that. And some of them you just sit there and go, what was he thinking? um, so at the time of this podcast being recorded, Elon Musk had just recently bought Twitter, and it was going through, well, it is currently going through a pretty crazy phase. And Elon Musk, whilst absolutely a visionary sort of a guy, I mean, he's invented, and really developed industry. So there's certainly the vision element of him. He hasn't articulated his vision at all well, not that I can tell, regarding Twitter. And he's laid off half the staff, and he's done all kinds of crazy stuff. And you're sitting there going, mate, if I was working for that company, geez, you'd run for the hills, because this is not a guy I can believe in. He hasn't spelled out his vision yet. He hasn't told us where we're going and why we're doing all this stuff. He's just gone in there with a sickle and just gone and just whipped everyone off at the knees. It's pretty crazy. But in other things, he's actually, a pretty visionary leader, which I find a real dichotomy. I struggle with it.
Well, I think he sold you on the leader part and on the visionary part. I mean, for example, Mark Tarpening and Martin Eberhard founded Tesla. Elon didn't do anything but take over Tesla and take over the board with his money and successive fundraising rounds, and got control of the board and fired those guys, and then took over as CEO and definitely grew it, made it into something it wasn't at the time. um, but that's kind of been his MO throughout. I'm not a big fan, obviously, of Elon. Um, I I don't think he's a great example, and I think that's one of the hazards of uh, you know idolizing, and our cultures do it, right? We put them on the cover of magazines. We idolize these people. We talk about them in superhuman type terms. You can think of a number of others, but when you really dig down and uncover a bit about them, some of these folks are really, not maybe who you want to model your behaviors after. Um, but then there's some others. I mean, speaking of Tesla, right? Nikola Tesla developed things and put them into the public realm for free. And if you really look at modeling and the good that someone does for society, you've got choices, right? You can pick and choose who you want to
Mm,
emulate, who you want to, and that doesn't mean you don't take anything from someone that you don't want to emulate. You can certainly learn from everybody, and there's certainly pieces of it. But I would caution folks maybe to compartmentalize and to pick and choose. You have the ability to pick and choose. You don't have to take it all or nothing. Um, what do you think on that, Matt?
mm. I think it's absolutely bang on. And there are so many really well-known examples where leaders have been idolized for all of the wrong reasons. I mean,
Mm,
Steve Jobs was a very unique individual. And I'm a fan of Apple. I mean, crikey, I've got tons of Apple products, and the products were amazing. But he was a crazy leader as far as that goes.
right.
He had his real strengths, but no one said, "Hey, well, he was a great guy. We could go out for a beer together." He wasn't that guy. He wasn't that guy. And I know a bunch of business leaders who have actually said they'd like to be more like him. And I'm like, have you read about him? Because he was
Right.
basically a dysfunctional human being who basically got himself into this business in the right role as far as the development and the pushing along of technology, which is great. Which, by the way, happened by his team more than he did. Um, but no, as a leader, he was, every report says that he was a horrible leader, but he's idolized, and you sit there and go, well, why? This does not make any sense at all. But that's our culture of celebrity, our culture of worshiping these people, and not going, okay, there may be a couple of things that we could take from him,
Mhm.
but maybe we don't take the whole picture. Maybe we just cherry pick a couple of traits that were actually quite. I mean, like, he had a high level of attention to detail, which is great. That's really good. It's a
Mhm.
really handy trait to have. But he was also, more than a bit OCD. Maybe that's not so healthy. So um, I think that also the great leaders that I've met, and I've met a whole bunch of them, um, there was also a level of humility involved in leading a business. And there's this great quote, and I don't know who said it, but it sticks with me. And about once a month, every month, I get to use it, which is really cool. And it was written from the perspective of a leader. I'll endeavor to find out who said it, but he said, "When my team succeeds, I look out the window. When my team fails, I look in the mirror." And you take a second and just ponder that. That is just so powerful and so humble. He doesn't take any of the credit. He gives all the credit away and takes all the responsibility. I'd follow that guy, and I don't even know who it is.
I've heard that too, and I'm trying to think of who it is as well. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, they've even developed like the window and mirror leadership model. But I think that's a good lesson. It's a great lesson. Again, we'll try to find. I'm looking. We'll find that and stick it in the notes. But
Yeah.
yeah, you take responsibility for things that don't go right, and I mean, the buck stops here, right? Was that Harry Truman? Those kinds of things, right? And you give, and I don't understand why there isn't more of this. You give your team full credit for the successes when, again, thinking of the coach model, thinking of the sports team model, when my players succeed, I succeed. Yet in the business
Mm,
world, so often we see managers trying to control too much, trying to be on the field, playing the positions, to
mm,
not giving their players all the information or all the resources or everything they need, or not giving them the credit. And I don't know, that just bugs me.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's very, very common. Um, I yeah, I've seen that a lot where the coach wants to be the star, and
Mhm.
actually you want the team to be the stars. And there's the All Blacks, you know, it's our national sport
Of
is
course.
rugby, and the All are one of the greatest teams of sporting teams in the world. Although not this year, we lost like I don't know 2 or 3 games this year. It's devastating. We were slightly below our average, which I think our average winning rate was like 83%
Yeah. Oh,
against
yes.
all
I've
international.
seen like 78 or something. But you drew against England, right?
We choked. We really did. I hate to say that. This is part, I wear a black t-shirt because it's the All Blacks. But one of the things is that one of the values of the All Blacks is that they play for each other. They don't play to be the hero. They play if they can't score the try, then they pass it to the man who's open who can score the try. So there's no glory in them necessarily getting the try if they're not going to get it. They just give it to someone who can, and so they play for their team. And I think that's one of the values that has made them so incredibly powerful as a team, because they play for each other. They never think about themselves, and there have been some amazing players who can bowl down entire teams, but they always give credit to the rest of the team. And rugby is one of those games where you doesn't matter how big and powerful and strong you are, you still have got to be fed the right ball at the right time in order to, in some cases, bowl over half a dozen opponents.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's really important that you play for the team and you give credit where credit is due, and it's not always just to you. Have you got anyone who you could look at as a really good example of a leader?
I think we see all kinds of leaders around us if we'll just pay attention. So you asked me that earlier, and I was thinking about it and struggling not to come up with, because the first thought is kind of all the cliches, right? Famous people in history, that type of thing, right? Um, but I think we look around and we see people who are inspiring folks, and I see it evolving and developing in my clients. I see it in other people I, you know, am in contact with, whether it's through the kids' sports, or some of the teachers, or other folks who are just quote unquote, helping, like the team parents or what have you. Um, some of
Mm.
them really step up and really, again, kind of paint a picture of something that you haven't seen yet. So
Yeah,
I'm not going to call out a bunch of names at this point, but I think that's the trait. That's you know, that coupled with the support, right? Really, really being genuinely wanting those around them to succeed. Those are the things that I look at. I really admire in leaders. How about you?
I've got a couple of people in mind. One of them is Jason, who runs a milking machine installation company,
Yeah.
and he is the perfect example of a tradesman who's gone up to being the CEO of a company. It's the biggest installer of milking machines in the Southern Hemisphere. They have installed them all over the world, from Peru to Pakistan to Russia and China and all that sort of stuff. And so dairy cow milking machines, they've put in literally thousands of them all over the world. And so he's not the perfect leader. I don't think there is such a thing, but there's a couple of things that he does exceptionally well. And the first thing he does is he thinks. He stops, and rather than, when you got two 4-year-old boys and one punches the other and then the other one punches straight back, and that's just one reacting to another. Whereas Jason responds. So if something happens, he just sits there and goes, okay, take a breath, take a moment, what's going to happen. Now, when you're at his level, he gets thrown all kinds of curveballs every day, from, the pandemic, for example. So we had to work through the pandemic, and where this particular company is an essential service. So the cows have to be milked for health reasons, obviously. And so we had to figure a way of isolating some staff. So if one person got it, not the whole staff would get it. And we just did this. And his two biggest things is he works really, really, really hard, and he thinks deeply. And therefore, the combination of those two things means that we come up with some really high quality plans. And when I started working with these guys, and we're now in our 14th year together, they were sort of down here. If the profit line was here, they were here. And now the profit line is here and they're up there somewhere. And that's on the basis of the quality of the thinking and the hard work as far as the strategy and the formulation of that goes for the company. And then we've got really good managers who execute all those plans and make sure that stuff gets done really well. So he's one guy. And the other person would be Haley, who runs an eatery. And I met her, I think we're in our 8th year together now. I met her, she was 27 years old. She was single, just returned from overseas. She had bought a business. She probably paid too much for it. She had to make it work. And again, if that's the profit line, she was way down here, and then now it's up there. And what she does exceptionally well is that she thinks many time frames ahead. And I think that's one of the key characteristics of a great leader is the time frames that you think. She always thinks 2 years out. So she doesn't think about what's going to happen today. We have a really strong vision of meaning for the company, but she's always doing practical things that won't impact her today, this week, this month, or this quarter, or even potentially this year. But she's always working a lot further out than everyone else, because everyone else is sort of focused on the here and the now and the today and that sort of thing. She's focusing a long way out. And again, one of her traits is her humility, because what her and I do together is she thinks I play devil's advocate and make sure that she's thinking through all the different nuances and that type of thing, and whatever she's thinking. And she loves being challenged. She likes to be wrong and learn and discover other ways of doing things. So she's really open. So for her, the traits that I really like is that she thinks a long way out and she's very strategic, but she's also really open and going, okay, well, yeah, let's have a look at something. If it's someone else's idea, she doesn't mind. She's really open to that. So that'd be two easily thought of examples.
I think that brings up another great point on the humility factor, but then also not needing to take credit for everything, right? Again, that seems to be, we think about the other side of the coin, the dysfunctions of leadership, the dysfunctions of management, and what those are, right? So that we can look at those things and not mimic them, right? Do the opposite. Because there's some examples out there, right, where you want to look at it and go, well, I don't want to be that guy, right? I don't want to do what they're doing. So what's the opposite of that? So I think when you're talking about the humility, looking farther out, not needing to take credit for each idea, just embracing the ideas wherever they come from, giving credit, telling people they did a good job. All those things are behaviors that we want to embrace, adopt rather, make sure that we're doing.
110%. Yeah, absolutely. And it takes a certain person to be humble. Not everyone, let's be honest, not everyone is naturally humble. I mean, we've seen some really, I know, it's hard to believe, but not everyone is. We've got leaders in very big positions, certainly, from the political perspective, let's just go there for a second, who have no humility, and it's all about them, and it's look at me, look at me, look at me, and that's scary to think that people can get to the top of these, in this case, political organizations, and it is literally all about them.
Matt, I'm going to jump in. That's a great example, because you made me immediately think of an EO 24 event that we did in Southern California, and Magic Johnson got on stage and talked, and then Magic walked around the audience and talked and was just wonderful, right? He was amazing. He was great. Sasha Strauss got up after him. If you don't know who Sasha Strauss is, check him out. He's a brand guy and a professor part-time at USC, Southern California. And Sasha was great, right? And the first thing Sasha said was, yeah, thanks, Reza, for putting me on stage between Magic Johnson and Gray Davis. So Gray Davis was the governor of California previously, right? Well, so Sasha nailed it. Sasha hit it out of the park. He was awesome. And then Gray Davis, this consummate career politician, got on stage, and it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible, because he did exactly what you just said. Everything was I, me, what I accomplished, what I did, in front of a room of 200 entrepreneurs who were just like, Dude, we just had Magic Johnson talking about his stories, his struggles, relating to people, coming out, giving a kid, a young kid, his cell phone number, and anything I can do to help you and support you, right? And it's just like, man, that's awesome, right? And then Sasha talking about inspiration and thinking and doing the hard work and how hard it is what you do as entrepreneurs and stuff. And then Davis got up there and just talked about himself, and we were all, I mean, you could just feel the energy in the room, just is like letting the air out of a balloon, like what is going on. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
don't, that's another great trait of leadership though, right? It's not about you, it's not about me, it's about the people, it's about
You
the
want to see
team, it's
something funny?
about the vision, right?
I'll show you.
Andy,
I'll give you something really funny.
what's that?
I was working with a client, and that was the note that I wrote for my client.
So for those
So
listening
I
who
have
aren't
this camera.
watching, Matt just held up a notebook that in big giant letters, it's not about you. And then what's it say? No, really, in the side. Yeah,
Yeah, no, really. And
it's
then
not
true
about
facts.
you. No, really, true fact. Yeah, it's not.
So just before we go, I just want to talk about one thing that was for me um, life changing. And I mentioned it last week that I'll tell you about this book that is one of the fundamental books I think that every leader and manager should read. It's called First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham. And what it is, it's research based, a view of what the best managers do. Now, he kind of conflates management and leadership, so he kind of mixes them both in there, but there's such great lessons in there. It's called First Break All the Rules. Marcus Buckingham, who's got a business, I think it's called Strengths Finder. So it's all about finding people's strengths and working on their strengths. He's a really clever guy. And when I first read this book, I was just like, wow, I've been doing everything wrong.
Well, we're taught to follow the rules, right? We're
Totally,
conditioned,
yeah.
right, from the time we're what, 4 or 5 years old, or before then. But throughout school,
Exactly.
we're taught to follow the rules. Sit in your chair, be quiet, listen to the teacher. Don't say bad words.
Exactly.
All this other stuff. So, yeah.
Mhm. And it's revolutionary because it's research based, and this was the first real business book that I read post university that was actually a business book and not like a textbook style sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what I really liked about it is that everything that he talks about in this book just makes kitchen logic sense. It's just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I can see that. You don't have to sort of think too conceptually or sort of too randomly to make sense of what he talks about, because what he talks about was here's a problem. Most people do this, but have a think about it this way and try doing that, which I think is great. And if you're an open person, you're an open leader, and you're looking to perform better than what your competitors are doing, if you're looking to really be different to your competitors, that's a pretty good place to start. Obviously, not as good as the best small business in the world, but that goes without saying.
Well, different books, different
Very different, yeah.
reason.
But certainly, First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham. No, we don't collect any commissions from Marcus Buck. Maybe we should. Maybe we should give him a call
We'll
and
look
say,
into
hey,
that.
book. He sold 4 extra copies. Woohoo, we can retire on that. But certainly that's a good place to start. And if anyone, maybe in a podcast in the future, we can go down our top 10 books of all time. It'll be interesting to see your list versus my list. I bet there's some overlap, because
Oh, sure.
awesomely simple in the back there. Funny
Right.
enough, I have my version right here.
Yep. Well, here's another of my favorite.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's so cool. I've actually
Saggy
ordered
Baggy
that.
Elephant.
The Saggy Baggy Elephant. Yeah. There's some really good business books which are really readable. Like
Hmm.
used to be. So let me give you an example of some stuff that's the sort of fun that if you're having trouble sleeping at night, that you can read that. This will help you sleep. It's gold. It really is fantastic. But you don't actually need to read a textbook like this. That's what I do. That's what I do for kicks. You can actually read a whole bunch of really interesting books, and written in a really sort of easy to take on way. I have some other books which truly would bore you senseless. I have a book on KPIs, a whole book on key performance
But,
indicators. Like, and every
but
time I
we
look at it,
read, but Matt,
how
we
sad,
read those so you don't have to.
exactly, how sad is my life? I'm reading a book on KPIs and making notes. um, but yeah, maybe we should do a top 10 and we should compare notes and talk about why we like these books, because I think
That'd
that
be
will be
awesome.
quite, yeah,
That'd be awesome.
very
Well,
good. All right, let's leave it there. So I would say that next time we get together, we're probably going to talk about our top 10 book list. What do you reckon?
probably. Well,
Probably.
thank you everybody for listening. Been another episode, the best small business in the world.
Have a great day.
Cheers.